without more of ado, I'm going to hand over to Bo Jensen, who is the chairman of EBCU. Over to you, Bo.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And good to be here again as well. And of course, yeah, you said my name. I'm Bo, and I'm chairman right now on the EBCU executive, elected 3 years ago now. This EBCU, European Beer Consumers Union, is a little funny setup, but as an umbrella organization for beer consumers organization all over Europe, we're actually glad to get people together because we are running a big network organization, as I see our main focus. It has been a bit strange to do a network organization where we actually can't meet, but a lot of initiatives was surfing during the pandemic, and actually one of them was this online meetings. And when I did my first online meeting 2 years ago, I said, no way, that's not going to work. But actually it did. I have cleaned up my office. That was the first thing who actually happened. So because when you invited people in your privacy as well. But we found out we actually can meet online and talk about different subjects. And we thought about this initiative to gather beer enthusiasts all over Europe, hopefully as members of our member organizations. And great thanks to you, Brett, to organize these things. It's a bit tricky about it. But this also, when we have a subject about a special beer style, is brand new. We don't start with the Pilsner like that way, but we go into it for this Gose thing. I have no idea where the idea was started, but maybe you can tell more about it, Markus, when we go over to you in a minute. But I'll be here all evening, so I'm really on the chat as well. If you have any EBCU stuff, please ask. I'll try to answer the questions right away. And I can see we also have members of other national organizations. We have a few ex-men from Danske as well, and also a chairman from Danske. So I think we can answer all the questions who will come up. So that was a short introduction, and then maybe back to you, Brett, and to an introduction about this.
Okay, thank you, Bo. And just a little promotion from me. If you have a suggestion for a beer style that would be good to run as a workshop, then please get in touch via the EBCU website. And it would be good for you to sort of, if you've got an idea of something you'd like to present, then that would be great. If you have any ideas, then please share them with me. My contact details I'll put on the chat. So while I mention the chat, the chat facility is a great way for you to sort of ask any questions, and I'm sure, knowing Markus, he will keep an eye on that. And I'd like to thank Markus and also Matthias for putting this little workshop together. It's the first one, as Bo says, that we've done like this. So we'll see how it goes. But I think it's going to be quite an exciting evening, and we'll look forward to more of these. Just a little bit of a promotion for me for the next workshop. This is on the Thursday, the 19th of May, and it's Italian Grape Ale by Simone Monetti. Now, what I would ask, if you do sign up if you get a ticket, please can you turn up, because we try to get the numbers right. We have to pay extra when we go over 100 participants. Now, we've got, I think, about 130, 140 people signed up. But at the moment, we don't have that many. We don't have that many at the call. So it's obviously not good use of resources if we got to pay for the call and we don't get the people turning up. So a little reminder. I suppose if you're here, then that doesn't apply to you. It's the people who aren't here that the question is aimed at. Anyway, you've heard enough of me. Thanks very much. I look forward to an evening, entertaining evening. So over to you, Markus.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Fantastic. And maybe as it's a good tradition, maybe to start with a beer. So just a second. I bring in Matthias from Leipzig, and just one moment. Here we are. And I think we together will first maybe drink a beer with you, and then I will talk a little bit about Gose, the Gose history, and then we will come back to Matthias and talk about himself, his history, and his Gose. And of course, you are allowed, and you really are, you should ask your questions and get in contact. That's the idea of this workshop. It shouldn't be just us talking, it's also you asking and we getting into a conversation. So, and I think we start with the beer. Matthias has also these very nice bottles in front of him. So this is the big one, and maybe some of you have also the small one. Maybe Matthias, you can show the small one also. Yes, this is the small one. So these are the two bottles where you get the traditional Leipzig Gose. We will tell the secret of the bottle afterwards. And maybe first we all have a sip of the beer. I hope you all were able to get one. And now you hear the sound of Gose. And now it gets into my glass. Yeah, and as we told, it's a very special beer style. Today it's brewed in a very huge variety of different beers. And maybe Matthias, you say just a few words about you and about the beer. Just a few.
Just a few, okay.
Yeah.
I'm Matthias Richter. I'm the brewmaster in Gose Brewery in Leipzig. And Gose is one of the oldest German beer styles. The first time it's written down is in the 14th century. And it's important when you drink Gose, don't say cheers or so on. Please say Gosiana.
Yeah, this is the right word, Gosiana.
Yes, Gosiana.
So as now we have the beer, I will tell you a little bit about the history, and then we come back also to Matthias and we talk about the beer and your questions. So I will try to share my screen now. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, here we are. So very warm welcome to you, to all of you. And we are talking today, as I said, about Gose, about the beer style, about the brewing, about the history. And of course, we are here from the EBCU, but we are also a little bit here from the GBCU, which is the German part of the EBCU. And we are, of course, also taking care about Gose and the traditional German beer styles. And that's maybe something only few people outside of Germany know, that we really have a great variety of ancient historic beer styles, all top fermenting, of course, all ales, and with very huge variety. Also like Berliner Weisse, maybe you know this one, but there are also many others. Maybe we can talk in further workshops. But today it's about Gose, and if you talk about Gose, we have to try first to locate it. And if we try to locate it, we have to look at the Hanseatic League. This was a union or an association of trade cities, and they were all aligned along the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. So these are the two big seas in the northern part of Europe, and especially most of them were in these times German cities. Nowadays you see here the colors, it's nowadays almost the whole coastal line from the Netherlands until the Russian part of the Baltic Sea. And the secret behind the Hanseatic League was that they found a new trade good, and this new trade good was beer. So this was their main trade good. Hamburg, for example, had over 500 breweries in these times. So we are in the 14th century, and they exported this beer to London and also to St. Petersburg, to Stockholm, to all the cities in these times. And the secret behind was that was a special beer. It was more durable, and for most of them, it was also better. So we will also lift that secret a little bit later. So if we get closer to this map, then you see the city of Goslar in the red circle. And this is the city where Gose is originating. So the first Gose was brewed, and also where the name comes from. So that's quite important. And you also see a little bit southeast of it. There is also Leipzig, which we will be talking about later. So we are in this Hanseatic times, and when we talk about the Hanseatic beers, so we think, what was this beer? How was it like? And if you see what were these beers, they were brown ales, and they were hoppy, and they were quite strong. So why? So brown, of course, in the old days, malting was not easy, and by malting, you always had some roasted grains. And if you then mix up all your grains, of course, the beers were all colored, all more or less amber, brown, almost dark. So there were almost no pale beers in these times. The grains were barley, but also wheat and oats, and normally always a mixture. So there were no clean recipes like today. In these times, they more or less used what they had. And if you look in the parts of Europe where you had big wheat areas, like in the today Netherlands, or also the Danubian area east of Munich, these were always wheat growing areas. So there the big wheat styles evolved, like the German wheat ale and also the Belgian wheat beer. And all the rest was more or less based on barley and other grains. And the other thing was the hops. And hops were quite new in this time, if you talk about the 11th century. And before they used a mixture of other herbs. And the big advantage of hops was it made beer durable. So it lasted longer, you could export it. And there was a second way, if you make beer stronger, it also gets more durable. So this were the advantage of the Hanseatic beer, and so they exported their beer everywhere in the known world in this time, and had a big success with it. And from these Hanseatic beers, two styles evolved, and one was the Bräuhahn, which is more pale beer, and as all these beers were smoky in this time, it was a little bit less smoky than the others. But maybe we talk about that when we make a smoke beer seminar. And the other beer style was Gose. This is the one we are talking today. And as Matthias already said, it was first mentioned in the 14th century. So we know the number of 1332, but there are also others. So it's not really clear, but this is maybe the first mentioning of this beer. And the interesting thing is that it had a mixture of herbs and hops, and it was salty. And so we have to look for what is this? Why is this? And if we look through the origin of Gose, we have to look for the river Gose. And the river rises in the Harz Mountains. And here you see a picture of the highest mountain where the source is. And that's also more or less the reason why we have this beer. And then we have to look in the ingredients. And as I said, one was salt. And there's the big question, why is salt in this beer? And there are several theories today. I listed here the three main theories. The first is that it was just used as a spice because salt was known, it was quite expensive, but it was also known for making things durable, and also people liked the taste of salt. And maybe it was just used as a spice to make the beer more noble and to make it better. And as I wrote down, for me, it's my favorite explanation. Maybe we can ask Matthias later what he thinks. It's always interesting to hear other opinions. The second is that the water was salty, and they said, yeah, because it's in the mountains, and it was quite hard water anyway, and so it was quite salty. But problem with this is we know of Gose brewing places which were not along the river Gose, and the beer was also salty. So you don't know, but that's maybe in question. And the third is that they said, okay, there was mining, intense mining around it with silver and iron, and they had wastewater and put that into the river, and that was quite salty. And then when they took the water to brew, the salt went into the beer. But we also know that there were channels made for the water source for the people, and they were made around the wastewater entrance. So this was clear water, and this was the water where they brewed with. So that also doesn't really seem very probable. So I think maybe it's the first explanation that it was more or less used as a spice. But as I said, we can ask Matthias later what he thinks. Maybe he has another idea. So, and the other ingredient is coriander. It's the seeds, not the leaves. And we know that it was used since about 1500 to brew the Gose. And what we know is that they also tried other herbs and mixtures, and it was more or less the favorite one which they ended up. And we know that from Belgium, for example, there are also many of Belgian beers are also brewed with coriander. And how did they get this spice in the Goslar? And this was about during due to the Hanseatic League, they imported the herbs and the spices, and so it got to Goslar. And also what we know, it was not used instead of hops, it was used in combination with hops. So because there was also hop growing and quite a lot of hop growing in the area around Goslar, so it was not a substitute to hops. Yeah, then it was more and more famous, and here you see a nice old picture of the city of Goslar, and it was growing, it was quite big, and we know that there was almost 400 breweries brewing Gose in Goslar, so really a big thing, and also other breweries in the area around. But the question is why? Why did they make all this beer? And the reason is, shortly before, they lost a war against the bishop, and with the peace treaty, they had to give up the rights on mining and the rights on the forests, logging. And this was their main income before, and so they didn't have money anymore, and they had to have another idea. And the new idea was, let's brew beer. And as we know today, it's a good idea, and so they brewed all this beer and exported it throughout the area in this time where it was possible. And so it went until even Belgium or Austria, also Hamburg, so quite in a wide area. And what we also know is that along the trade routes where the beer was exported, people founded new Gose breweries. So it went step by step a little bit around the country. So it was not only based anymore on the Goslar area. Yeah, what is today? What is the story until today? If we look the house here, this is the house of the today brewery in Goslar, where they brew Gose. And in this house, they brewed since 1720, so quite new for a German thing, but still old. And but they ended up about 100 years later. Then there was a little revival in the 1930s, but as you can imagine, these were hard times for brewers in Germany, short before the war and then during the war, so it ended up again. And then they started in 1993, again with the old recipes, with the old ideas of Gose in Goslar. So this is the one place, and if you look who is the maker of it, we have Odin Paul, you see him here on the left. And he's there since 2004. And you see also his small brewery where he brews his beer. He makes two types of Gose, a dark one and a pale one. And also he told me his recipe, he's using for his 1200 liter batch, 500 grams of coriander and 500 grams of salt. So for all the hobby brewers, you can also do this. So, and now we go to Leipzig, to Matthias' place. And you see here the map of Germany, and we go a little bit more to the east. So first we have to talk about how did it get there. And as I told you, Goslar exported the beers, and so it also came to Leipzig. And in these times, cities had to allow that beer from outside was possible to be brought in, and this was allowed in 1738. So then Gose could be imported into the city, and it got quite famous. People liked it. And what happened in Goslar, the beer was not a sour beer. So no sourness at all, and also it is still today. So if you try the Gose from Goslar, you won't have any sourness in these beers. But with the transport from Goslar to Leipzig, it took a while, and so the beer got sour. And so in Leipzig, the people thought, okay, it has to be like this. So Gose got more or less a sour beer style. And when Napoleonic Wars happened, the resource was cut, so they couldn't do the import anymore. And so they had to start brewing themselves. And the first Leipzig brewery in Gose we know is from 1824, a castle, Dölnitz, where they brewed the first Gose in this area. Yeah, here we see also Leipzig in these times, and they had more than 20 pubs serving Gose. The names of the pubs were Gose and Schenke, and also then this famous word for cheers, Gosiana, was invented in these times. And there were more than 70 breweries in Leipzig brewing Gose at this time, so really a huge success also. And here we have a little insight. I found some coasters from this Gosenschenke from the pub Ohne Bedenken, where they showed a little bit in the old times, maybe 150 years ago, how it looked like and how the people were enjoying Gose in which places. And you see it was quite cozy, nice place, garden, and also a restaurant, so quite nice environment. And so Gose was an all-day beer. It was not a special thing, it was just the beer to drink. Yeah, and today, now we're getting closer to Matthias. The last Gose in Leipzig was brewed in 1966, and then they revived it in 1985 in this Gosenschenke in the pub. We just saw the coasters in 85 in a very small scale. And the first really professional brewery in Leipzig, which reopened, was the Bayerischer Bahnhof. You see above a little bit of the building. And originally, as you know, the German word Bahnhof means station, and Bavarian station, that meant it was the end of the trains coming in from Bavaria. So in these old times, we are in the end of the 19th century when it was built. It was the connecting between the kingdom of Bavaria and the kingdom of Saxonia. And these were always important things. And in the Bayerischer Bahnhof, people came and waited for the trains and ate and drank. And so, of course, it was always a place where you could get your Gose. And so in 2000, when they rebuilt it, they say, okay, let's make a brewery inside. And that's what they did. You see the brewery on the bottom left. And they brew the beer there. It's a kettle sour beer. And we have also, of course, salt and coriander. Yeah, and now we come to Matthias, our guest today. He's brewing there since 2003. And yeah, on the bottom left, you see him with some hops, and in the center with his brewing kettle. And he's making many different types of Goses. He also made a double bock, for example, and some barrel age series, and also other interesting approaches to the idea of Gose. And he's also brewing some non-Gose beers, so a dark one and a pale one and other beers. And he's making a spirit called Alash, which maybe we can talk about when we are in our chat. Yeah, and now we come back to the beer. You also see these famous bottles, and maybe this is one thing we talk about first. Yeah, I will stop the screen sharing now and come back to Matthias. And here we go. Yeah, so Matthias, maybe first, cheers. Did I say something wrong? Did I forgot something? What would you say?
Oh, it was perfect. One or two things are new for me, but I'm not an historian. I'm more a brewer, and I'm more interested in the technical parts of brewing Gose.
Okay, so but no big mistake.
No.
Okay, perfect. So maybe first, if we describe the beer, so maybe someone of you have also the beer, and you can write in the chat what your impressions are, and we also can talk about it. How would you describe the color of the beer, Matthias? What would you say? What's a good word?
It's in pale yellow color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
we use a little bit of Munich malt to get an yellow color in the beer.
And you also have wheat and wheat malt in the beer?
Yes, it's half barley and half wheat malt.
Mm-hmm. But all malt, no raw grain?
No, all malt, yeah.
All malt, yeah. And can you tell us about the amount of salt and coriander, or is it more a secret in your brewery?
The coriander is more than in Goslar, and the salt is a little bit less.
That's good. So people can try out now. Okay. Yeah. So let's have the smell of the beer. Oh, Andre asks if we see Matthias. I tried to pin Matthias also. Can you all see only me? Okay, because I tried to bring us both. Okay, maybe Andre, you make your window a little bit bigger. Okay, so back to the beer. We were talking about the smell of the beer. Yeah, and I think it's both. You smell the little bit soapy coriander notes, herbs, but also Yeah, I know you cannot really smell salt, but it smells a little bit like being on the seashore. So there are some salty notes and also a little bit maltiness. So yeah, what would you say about the aroma?
It's a little malty, and then you have notes from the coriander. It's like citron. I see.
Mm-hmm. Lemon. Mm-hmm.
Oh, lemon. Yes,
lemon. Yes,
lemon. My English is not so very well.
Oh, we will. Mine too, but somehow we make it. Okay, so you have some citrusy notes also, and yeah, and when you taste it, then it's a quite interesting mixture of a sweet, salty beginning. Then you have the citrus notes again. Then it all mixes, and then you have a slightly bitterness in the palate. Yeah. And then it's quite dry, so it's very interesting. And if we come back to the bottles, but what is the difference of the beer in the big bottle and in the small bottle?
And of the other, in our brewery, it's so the small bottle. It's for normal drinking, and the big bottle is as a present bottle, and the shape of the bottle is an origin shape of these Gose bottle. It's very typical for the bottles, and in the end of the 19th century, it was possible to buy Gose in a swing top bottle, and it's not correct. Today, the bottle had a swing top. In former times, they don't have any stopper. So they use the bottle in the Gosenschenken in the pubs for the secondary fermentation. They got the Gose from the brewery in the last part of the main fermentation. And so then they filled the bottles, put the bottle in the cellar, and the secondary starts in the bottle. The bottle had a long neck, it's a very long neck, and the yeast rise up to the top, get dry, and close the bottle. And it was the closing was so good that a carbonation could find place in the beer. And the customer had the possibility to drink a young Gose. The young Gose was 1 or 2 weeks old in the secondary fermentation, and the young Gose wasn't sour because the lactic acid bacteria need a longer time as the yeast to work. Then they had a middle-aged Gose. The middle-aged Gose, it's like our Gose from the sour taste. The pH is about 3.6, 3.8. And the aged Gose was very sour. The aged Gose was, I think, more than 3 months old.
Yeah, so it was more or less a natural sealing of the bottle by the dried yeast. And so it was easy to keep the beers in these times. And, and you, I would say you could compare that more or less with a real ale from the British Islands, if you have. So, yeah. Yeah, and today you still have the same beer in the big and in the small bottles, or is there any difference? Yeah.
And the big bottle, the beer isn't pasteurized, and in the small bottle, we must pasteurize the beer.
Yeah.
It's the wish of the customer.
Yeah, and the beer is a kettle sour beer, so the sourness originates during the mashing, or when do you do that?
Our brewery is constructed for Gose brewing. We have a separate lactic acid fermenter in the brewing cellar, and we use a lot of fermented lactic acid for Gose brewing. So we use the lactic acid bacteria from the malt. We wash the bacteria down and put them in the vessel, add unhopped wort to the vessel, and hold a temperature of 48 degrees for 24 hours. And so the bacteria is growing and produce lactic acid. And then we mix a lactic acid wort with a normal wort, and we boil and fix to the pH in the wort.
And was this a process you took over when you came to Leipzig, or did you develop this also in a way?
No, I took over. The brewery was opened in 2000, and I started in this brewery in 2003. So the Gose recipe, they had the Gose recipe in 2000, and I brewed the beer with the same recipe over 20 years.
But you also made other versions.
Yeah.
So, just a moment. You have a first question. What is the pH of the beer after souring?
It's between 3.6 and 3.8.
Yeah. So you also made other versions like the double bock and others. So what was just your craziest Gose you ever did?
The craziest. Well, I think about the double bock from Tequila Barrel.
Oh yes,
It's my favorite. We made it with 10% alcohol, put it to Tequila Barrel for 1 year, and you had the flavor of the Gose, but a lot of more. And you got also the flavor of tequila and the salt of the tequila. It was a very good match.
Yeah. Yeah, but when I was young, we always drank tequila with a little bit of lemon and some salt. So it's an easy way to put Gose in it. Yeah, do we have other questions? So please feel free either to write in the chat or to raise your hand. That's why we are here. So it's a workshop. You can also ask your questions and feel free to join us. How is the water in Leipzig? Do you modify it for brewing?
No. We use water from our water supplier. We don't have an own spring. And we have an residual alkalinity a little bit under 5. And so we can brew every beer we can brew pills, we can brew Gose, and we also can brew with beers with water.
Okay, Sven is raising his hand. So your question, please.
Ja, Entschuldigung, ich werde das mal auf Deutsch stellen, die Frage. Du kannst es gerne übersetzen, Markus.
I will translate in English, so okay, yes.
Thank you. Und zwar, die Berliner Weiße wird ja in einem Kelch sozusagen serviert, in einem sehr großen Glas. Die Gose, was ja auch so ein bisschen in die säuerliche Richtung geht, in einem anderen Glas. Welche Rolle spielt das Glas eigentlich? Also gerade beim Sauerbier, ist da eher dieser Kelchcharakter interessant oder ist eher so ein schmaleres Glas gut? Ich hoffe, du kannst es übersetzen.
Yeah. So the question is about the glassware. So he said, because he comes from Berlin and there the Berlin Weisse is quite popular, and they use huge chalices for drinking the beer with about half a liter or even bigger from the size, and always we're using this in the old times. And so he's asking if also for the Gose there's a special glassware, maybe also bigger glasses, or does it have any role in drinking Gose?
I think Berliner Weisse in the white glass, it's the Berliner Weisse had more carbon dioxide. And by drinking in the white glass, more rise to the top, and you get a little bit more foam, like champagne. And Gose had not so much carbon dioxide, and so we use this shape of glass. And in former times, the glasses were much bigger, 1 glass for 1 bottle.
Yeah, or you can use this wonderful EBCU glasses. Let us know if you need one. Yeah, okay. And we have more questions in the chat. One is, it is explained in a book that the natural closure in the big bottles came also through SCOBY or SCOBY, which is as in kombucha, the tea fungus. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, maybe Florian, you can explain that better than me, if you want to go deeper.
Yeah, in the book it's mentioned that back in the days, the secondary fermentation was part of a mixed fermentation, not only with sec, also with maybe Brettanomyces and Acidobacter and other stuff. And through that, you had similar to the kombucha fermentation, a kind of SCOBY, this symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria, and this is a ladder-like structure. And through that, it was possible that you had carbonation in the bottle, because with the normal yeast krausening or yeast pellicle, it's not tight enough. Or
yeah, can be possible.
Yeah, sounds somehow logic.
Yes.
Yeah. Andre asks, what is the ratio between barley and wheat malt?
Half and half.
Half and half, 50-50. Yeah, okay. And another nice question from Ferry. How about Reinheitsgebot, purity law? So because you add coriander and salt, I understood that it cannot be named beer then.
No,
does it matter?
It's a beer Spezialität. Cannot translate it.
A specialty, a beer specialty. Yeah.
It's not called beer.
Yeah, it's not called beer. And also there are exceptions for the old traditional styles, luckily. So if you make like Berliner Weisse, like Gose, you can use these old ingredients. And also you can today always go to the office and ask for approval for a special beer. And in most areas that works quite well if you're not in Bavaria. That's maybe the biggest problem, but in other areas it works quite well. So we have another raised hand from Frank.
Yeah, hi there. I have a follow-up question to Florian's about the SCOBY type thing. And I've also read about this, but not necessarily SCOBY, but I think it was more mentioned that it was yeast that was also closing the bottle. And I see this nice bottle in front of you, Matthias, which seems to be this tall one with a long neck. And I seem, yeah, exactly. And I seem to remember that apparently in old times, if the text was right, the bottle was actually not closed physically, but was closed through the yeast thing at the top. Do you know anything about this, or is there any truth in these stories?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
It was closed with.
Yeah, he explained that.
Yeast,
Oh, sorry, I repeat again for you, Frank. We were just talking about that. Exactly, that happened. So that it didn't have a swing top. It was just like this.
Ah, okay.
And then after the second fermentation, it was closed, and then you had this.
Right.
No problem. And also during the fermentation, then you had the carbonation. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Then the next question is: the souring process only made by lactic bacteria, or is it more a mix of several cultures?
No, only lactic bacteria.
Yeah. Today.
Today, yes.
Yeah. Then Mark means: is it possible to get the Leipzig Gose in the UK?
No. 3 years ago we had an importer, but at the moment we had no importer in the UK.
Yeah, you can try to order it, but it's at the moment it's not so easy to get beer in the UK. Somehow it works. Sometimes it works and sometimes not. But maybe you give it a try. Yeah. Then Ronald says Gose doesn't fit the Reinheitsgebot. Okay, how come the brewers could brew this beer an exception? So yeah, we already talked about that. It's one thing is that they don't call it beer; they call it a specialty, and the other thing is that it's allowed that you can ask for an exception at the office, and then you normally get a permit, and then you can brew also these special beers, like also juniper beers or some fruit beers. So Germany has a little bit more variety today than it has before. Next question: is there a relationship between Gose and Gose? Because it sounds so similar.
Not in history, but in the style. Both are sour beers, and I think the old Gose had a lot of different yeast and bacteria they fermented.
Yeah, so maybe they have in common that they are both wheat-based beers.
Yeah,
and both were somehow spontaneous fermented. So yeah, but I think the name has no connection, but the style is an idea which is quite close. So Ferry asked, how was the bottle popped when it was closed by the yeast? So how did you get to the beer?
In former times, they made this on the bottom or on the floor, and a little bit later they use a little vessel in the pub and put it. in these Fässer.
Okay, so good. So another question. Otherwise, I will ask one. So you get a lot of visit from brewers from out of Germany. So what do they ask you, and what was maybe your most interesting experience with brewers from abroad coming to Leipzig and asking you about Gose?
Well, this was a lot in the last years.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
Yeah.
so many people come to him because he's very well known internationally as being responsible for this beer style, and so yeah.
I got from one brewer, I got a handwritten letter after he was back in his hometown. I found it good.
Okay, great. So we have another question. Do you know how many Gose breweries are still brewing Gose in Germany today?
In Germany, not, but in Leipzig we have 3 breweries, or in the area of Leipzig we have 3 breweries. They brew permanently Gose. The Gosenschenke in Goles brew own Gose. Then we had Ritterguts Gose and our Gose. And I know that Elmania in Bonn brews a Gose, and I think the Welde brewery brews also a Gose.
Yes, there are several craft breweries brewing Goses, and as I said also at the beginning, there's a huge variety of Goses nowadays. So they make it with cucumber, or they make it with fruits or whatever. So quite far away from the original, but quite interesting and a huge idea. So just a moment, we have more questions. One is, when is the coriander and the salt added in the process?
There's a secret.
Oh.
You can use coriander like aroma hop. You can also use coriander like dry hopping, but there is a little bit risk of infection. But the flavor is very good when you use dry hopping or dry coriandering.
That's a nice new word, dry coriandering. And you can only say it before you drink the first beer. Okay, and the salt?
Salt, better enter of the brew.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Frank, you are still raising your hand. Is it from the old times or new?
Again, yeah, I have a question, Matthias.
Yes.
So, in your opinion, in a good balanced Gose, should the salt be tasteable, or should it just be that you cannot taste it like salty?
Or in my opinion, the salt is on the threshold you can taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you have only a mineralic taste, not a direct salty taste.
Mm-hmm.
It's but for me, is it?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Another question is, are there cooperations between Gose brewing breweries to maybe also develop new styles or new ideas?
I have made two cooperations. One with Sebastian Sauer from Freigeist, and one with Ratan Brewery, but they normally made no Gose.
Yeah. So a Hamburg brewery,
yeah,
and a guy who makes lots of research in historical and special beers. And what was the Gose type you brewed with, Sebastian? Was it also special or more?
There is what was a special as well. The Geisterzug Gose. This is a Gose that's based on an old recipe from Goslar. In this Gose we use spruce needles. It's a historic recipe. In Goslar they had a lowering vessel, a wooden lowering vessel with a straw, and this one doesn't lower very good. So they use the needles of the spruce for clarifying the wort, and by this process the aroma from the needles came into the wort and into the beer. So we try this, but not the process. We use only the needles for brewing.
And how was the taste?
It's in my opinion fantastic. It's a little bit like Sati. but with more flavor from the spruce needles.
Very interesting. Okay, another question was, it was mentioned historically that the Gose is sour, but at first it was not sour, and the question is, weren't all the beers in the old times more or less sour?
Yes, when you have enough time, they got all sour.
Yeah. You think you have to think that in the old times beer had to be drunk very quickly. So you brewed it and you had fermentation maybe 1 to 3 days, and then you had to drink it. Otherwise, it all got sour. So yeah. And that was also the thing which I mentioned in the beginning, that the Hanseatic League had this big advantage because their beer were more durable, and so they could export it and transport it. And yeah. So the next question: which Dutch beer comes closer to the Leipzig Gose? Okay, that's a tough question. So I was in the Netherlands, and I also visited your brewery. The question comes from Van der Streek. I think the only salty beers I got in the Netherlands were Goses. So I think it's maybe if you use a very old version of wheat beer and then you put salt and coriander in it. Maybe. Oh yeah, Florian asks, are there special coriander seeds? So do you select special varieties, or do you just go to the supermarket and buy
No, not
coriander?
supermarket. I buy it from a supplier.
But it's just normal, so not a special Indian variety, for example, or okay. And did you try different types of coriander?
No.
Okay. So maybe your homework. Okay, going back to the history of Gose, is it known why so many breweries stopped brewing Gose?
Yeah, I think sour beers wasn't so popular.
Yeah, it's the same history as we have in all the European countries, especially also in Germany, but also in Great Britain and everywhere else. When the lager brewing evolved in the 19th century, it vanished the normal beer culture. So everywhere lager won, and so in all the countries the ale breweries got more and more less. So that's also the reason in Germany, and also in these times with the industrialization, brewers had to grow to be able to survive, and so more and more brewers closed down and others got bigger, and so that's what happened. So Frank, I have to download your picture because I cannot see it, but there's another question. Okay. There was an answer for our friends from the Netherlands, that maybe the Keuter beer, or Marco, do you mean? I think he meant Keuter beer was the origin, which was close to the Gose in the Netherlands. It was the predecessor of also Kölsch, for example. But I just have to open the picture of Frank to be able to tell.
Sorry, I assumed you would be able to see it directly.
No, it's not. It's a mess. No, I have it. Oh, he opened a picture from a blueberry pineapple marshmallow lassi Gose. and so I try to share it. But here we go.
If it works.
And the question is, Matthias, what do you think about this?
Too much. For me, it isn't a Gose. It's a fruit beer.
I would say I like the color.
Yeah.
But I think it's very strange to put such a red beer in such a green can. So I know people who could get crazy with that.
Yeah, it always makes me wonder why they feel the need to call this a Gose. It's just so bizarre.
Maybe it sounds sexy.
Yeah, probably.
But look at the price. It's $12.50. So how many Goses could I drink at your brewery for $12.50? 3. Okay, so maybe it's better to get these 3. Okay. Yeah, another question from you, folks. Oh, not at the moment. Okay, so you have the big bottles and the small bottles, where they also used other versions like half a liter bottles in the former time.
I have read an
Oh, sorry.
question that direct to me, I think.
Ah, okay. So
there's done.
okay. Maybe I don't know who put this question, but maybe put it in for all of us. Then I can also read it and can help Matthias. And before there is a nice question from Klaus. Do you think Gose will still be there in 50 years' time?
Can you?
Will Gose still be here in 50 years?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm also quite convinced. Ferry asks, Gose in cans. So what about sourness and saltiness and the environment in a can? Does it affect? What do you think?
I think it hasn't an effect. Fritz from Emilia produced Gose in der Dose.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also had some Goses from the States in cans,
Yeah.
and it was always okay. So
Yeah.
maybe it's no matter. Then there's a question: single infusion mash.
Yep.
At what temperature?
62, 72.
Yeah, or maybe Eric, you explain a little bit more in detail what you mean. Yeah. Then Sven asks, there is a big rivalry between Düsseldorf and Köln, for example, rivalry. Is there also something Leipzig and maybe Halle or another city? No. Okay.
No. Gose is a or was a beer not only in Leipzig, it was in the region Leipzig, and Halle is close to Leipzig, and so in Halle it had access also Gosenschenken, or perhaps for serving Gose.
And another nice questions: have all your Gose beers been kettle sour, or did you also try mixed fermentations, or are you maybe planning to try this?
The problem is I have a fermentation cellar for all beers, and so I cannot make combined fermentations.
So you also didn't even try it maybe in a barrel or something like that?
Yeah, maybe at home. When the kids are bigger.
Okay, good, nice idea. Yeah, another question: is there Gose from big breweries like Heineken? Do they have interest in these beers?
I think no.
So you didn't have someone from them coming to you and asking if you could come over and.
Oh, I think I had to send a box of bottles to AB InBev.
And was there any feedback?
3 or 4 years ago. They have bought it in an online shop.
Oh. So you see whom it's going to. And,
yeah.
Okay. Another question: are there special fruits which you would recommend for making fruit Goses? So some which maybe go better, or cherries?
Yeah, it's in Leipzig. Any of the customers drink Gose with cherry liqueur. It's a historical mixture. Also with raspberry syrup or wood syrup. It's like Berliner Weisse.
Yeah, that's also interesting that they also mixed or mix Gose with other things like syrups, like raspberry or woodruff, as they do it with the Berliner Weisse. And also they use spirits. So also we have this famous spirit from Leipzig, which is called Alasch, and it's made with caraway. I hope you know all the Kümmel in German. I don't know if another language, if you have problems, try to translate caraway or Kümmel. And it's very special in the area. And you, as we see behind you, we see a distillery. So you are also distilling.
Yeah, and this was only quite roomy. That's why I sit in this distillery. Yes, we produce also a caraway liqueur, and it's also in historical mixture. In former times, they mix the liqueur with the Gose. to catch the sourness with sugar from the liquor. And in former times, when you drank Gose your first time, the lactic acid bacteria make the stomach a little bit faster. And by using caraway, they hope that they don't have this effect.
That's a good idea, and maybe also an.
But you must like it. It's a little bit strange taste.
Maybe also you put in a drug against headaches, and then you have the perfect match. No, sorry, just a joke. I just look in the chat. One question: does the dark version have more roasted flavor, or is another one? Is another difference? So I can answer this. Of course, it has more roasted flavors. So we are talking about the Goslar Gose and the pale version and the brown version. And of course, in the brown version, you have more malty, more roasty taste, also some nutty aroma, and also like burned almonds, also a little bit candy-like. So it's really, I like it also. It's a quite nice approach to the idea. And above all that is that soapy floral character of the coriander, which really makes it an interesting and round drink. And oh yes, fairy means plums. Would also be a good fruit pairing. I think he's right. Then we have another question from Hubert about what I said, that it's limited availability in the UK. I can only tell you from the events I organized in the last year. We did lots of online events and online tastings. And when we had participants from the UK, especially in the last year, this year it got better, maybe half of the parcels did arrive at all, and quite late. So, but we don't really know why, because I filled every sheet and made everything, but somehow it was a little bit confusing. But this year it got better. So then we have Tom mentions that there are some American craft breweries which are making fruit in the beer, and they call it Gose, no matter if it's sour or not. So what would you say? Is that still a Gose?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. Tom is a very well-known beer judge from California. So maybe you can also tell us something more about Gose in your region, if you are here. Let's wait if he comes. Do you enter your beers in competitions? Yes? No. Okay. Yeah, that's a problem with the iconic breweries, because you can only lose. Because if you win the gold medal, everyone says, okay, of course. But if you don't win the gold medal, then they say, oh, something has to be wrong. So that's the same with Bamberg Schlenkerla, for example. They never enter beer in a competition for smoked beer, because they only have the chance to win or lose, and they cannot really win. So okay. So Tom, are you here now?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect, wonderful. So maybe you let us know a little bit about America and Gose.
Well, it's a lot of the craft breweries jumped on it right away once it started to people started to learn about it, and it came in, I guess, a little bit after craft discovered Berliner Weiss. So people were already starting to fruit up Berliner Weisses. And then when Goses came, they really, really seemed to go whole hog into it. And some of them are quite nice. But basically it was saying that some places are just putting salt in a fruit beer and calling it a Gose. And it's not even necessarily sour, and there's no coriander in it. It almost becomes shorthand for salt, and it's a shame because it just sort of dumbs down the style, or it dumbs down people's education of the style. So it's hard to find a craft American, traditional Gose. It's just become like the base for a fruit beer.
So it's always
and,
fruity.
which is kind of a shame.
Yeah, so it's always fruity and salty. That's it. Or
Oh yeah, almost always fruit in it. It's never just a basic Gose. So it's that's kind of difficult. It becomes very, very trendy, and then then you're set with that, and it's like, yeah, well, and they're also calling them fruited sours now, and they're not really sour. They're tart like the fruit, but a lot of them have lactose in them, so they're sort of milkshakes. They're like papaya milkshake sort of beers, maybe some salt in it, so they can call it a Gose. People come in and like sour beers, and they order it. And they go, "This isn't sour at all. It's sweet." It's like, well, yeah, that's what's been called salted. I mean, fruited sours now, which makes no sense because they're fruit, but they're just, like I said, it's like the tartness of the fruit. If you have an orange or a tangerine or something, it's about as sour as that, as that fruit pulp would be. So it's kind of misleading, and it's just confusing the consumer, I think, which I'm always trying to change that and try to explain that to people, but sometimes it's just a losing battle because it's fruit beers are real popular now. So
maybe you find a brewery in California to bring Matthias over and having brewing there and a real Gose, for example.
Yeah, the what is it? The other Gose, is it Ritterguts?
Yeah, Ritterguts. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it Ritterguts? He came over once to one of our Mikkeller bars at downtown LA a couple of years ago and brought some of his beers. And that was pretty nice. I mean, actually, there very few people showed up to talk to him. It just wasn't. I kept thinking, I can't believe they're doing this. It's Mikkeller was also doing other crazy kinds of beers, but they would, they would bring in brewers, particularly brewers of traditional styles, and that would be great. And I was just surprised it wasn't a bigger event. It was just real casual, and I got to sit and talk with them for about a half an hour or so. But it's craft beer is just so trendy now. It's difficult. It's harder and harder to pull out the really good beers.
Yeah, and as I always say, the most important thing is that you know the roots. So if you know the roots of the Gose, if you know the root of a style, then you can develop that in any ways, and you still know where it comes from. The only danger is if people maybe put some yogurt in their brewing kettle and then they say, I make a Berliner Weisse, and that's maybe sometimes
sure, yeah. Yeah, I think it's it's fine to break the rules, but it helps to know the rules first before you break them, and understand why you break them consciously in a creative way rather than just not paying attention to traditional style and just doing what you want and stealing the name.
Yeah, perfect.
That's more another kind of cultural appropriation. Sadly, Americans are good for.
But you also put a lot of spice into the beer culture, so that's perfect.
No, it evens out, I think.
Yeah, and I just was looking in the chat. Brett wrote some of the British Gose in the chat, so if someone is here from Great Britain, you can maybe order some of these Goses. Okay, any more questions from you out there? Because we are a little bit over time, so if of course we are here for questions, so if you still have questions, feel free to ask. And if not, I would hand back to Brett to say goodbye.
Well, thank you, Markus, and thank you, Matthias. It's been a brilliant session, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed it, and we'll do more of these. So if you have a beer style that you'd like to share with the rest of the community, get in touch through the EBCU website. Love to have your recommendations, and we'll put some more on.